We're also going to need to put our heads together on the Thursday night clap, because we need to find a way that demonstrates, as a nation now, officially, we don't value people earning less than £25,600 a year, £25,600 a year. We don't value them. So when we clap on Thursday nights, we're only actually clapping for people who earn more than that. I don't know how we're going to do it. We're going to have to come up with some sort of Freemason-style clapping equivalent of a handshake, aren't we? Or possibly we all need to hit a really expensive pan. Would that do? We get a Le Creuset casserole dish? Oh, no, foreign. Well, that's right. We need to put our heads together. How are we going to be able to clap on Thursday night while, for some people, attacking teachers, and also now supporting a government that has rendered anybody earning less than £25,600 a year somehow inferior to everybody else, less desirable, less valuable than everybody else? There's a little vox pop, as they're called, a dispatch from Marianna, Florida, in the New York Times that has caused something of a brouhaha in America. Now, oddly, it won't shock anybody who's listened to this programme on a regular basis, because we worked this out some time ago in the context not just of Donald Trump, which is what this vox pop is about, but also, of course, in the context of Brexit. What is it you get out of this? What is it you're celebrating? What is it you're most looking forward to? And some people finally started sort of telling the truth. You remember the caller last year. I know he's a liar, but I like him lying because it upsets people like you and Sadiq Khan so much. And you sort of sit there thinking, what's he talking about? This is the quote from a Trump voter who is currently suffering from the shutdown, and which cuts to the very heart of British and American politics over the last 4 or 5 years. She said, he's not hurting the people he needs to be. So although she remains a supporter, she said, I voted for him and he's the one who's doing this, i.e. presiding over the lockdown. Something he could, of course, have portrayed to the American people as for their own good, but he's failed that so spectacularly, he almost makes Boris Johnson look competent. I voted for him and he's the one who's doing this. I thought he was going to do good things. He's not hurting the people he needs to be hurting. So if you were under any illusions or doubts at all, Priti Patel's immigration bill is designed to persuade people in this country that she is indeed hurting the people that she needs to be hurting. It's a very cynical, very transparent attempt to tell people that, yeah, look, we're making life harder for those mythical foreigners that you hate so much, while telling the ones you actually live next door to and work with that you don't mean them. And the threshold she's chosen is an interesting one. It's £25,600, a figure that actually some starting salaries for teachers don't even reach. But it's this question of value that I'm most interested in today. There's two ways I'd like to approach this story. I don't want to talk about where you were born, because, as you know, I don't care. If you're a good person and you do good things, then I am proud to call you a friend, a neighbour, a compatriot. It really doesn't matter to me whether you were born on the other side of the world or the other side of Chiswick. The point is this: they have this enormous majority. They don't really have any proper policies in the context of how your life might improve, but they got Brexit over the line by promising to make life harder for foreign people. People stopped pretending almost immediately that they were looking forward to any improvements in their own lives. Do you remember the calls we took from people saying that they actually voted for their children to be unemployed? You must be loving the COVID-19 economic impact, and they voted to be poorer, and they knew that their life was worse, and then Rees-Mogg started talking about economic benefits taking 100 years to arrive. So that con was put in place almost before the ink was dry on the referendum result. But the notion of value is one that's very easy to miss. It's very easy to overlook. So who are the people you're hurting? Well, they are theoretical foreigners who might have moved here at some point in the future if we hadn't introduced this policy. So you're hurting them. Yeah. But of course you're also hurting anybody who's already here and now finds themselves part of a society in which they are officially less valuable than a colleague over the road who earns £10 a year more. Officially, measurably less valuable.
You have to understand that the Tories, and Boris Johnson in particular, understood what a watershed Brexit was. This was a movement, this was a moment in British history when everything came together in the perfect way. In the sense that it would convince the public to truly vote against their own interests. Brexit was that aligning of the stars. You had a moment where people who had been continually fed lies after lies after lies for decades, the balance had been tipped. They arrived at a point where they said, I'm willing to vote for something that will not benefit me personally. It will not improve my life. It will not improve the lives of my children, my grandchildren, the people in my community. It will not benefit those people directly, but it will benefit some abstract idea of sovereignty, of taking back control, of controlling money again, borders. The really successful campaigns organized by the likes of Dominic Cummings were able to convince people to support the abstract over the concrete. Now, politicians, since the beginning of politics, have always attempted to sell something that would benefit the voter personally. So you would have a better job, you would have a better house, your taxes would decrease. So there would be some tangible or even an intangible benefit for the individual for supporting a particular policy or a particular politician who's presenting a policy. While Brexit was a departure from that, Brexit was about selling people an idea that would not benefit them individually as voters. A complete contrast to how politicians would normally sell a policy. So once people realized that they had been conned, and no one likes to be conned, people would prefer to pretend or ignore the con man than to admit that they were gullible. Now, of course, the likes of Cummings could see this coming. They knew this was going to happen ahead of time, and they planned for it. So what did they do? They redirected the anger away from the politicians towards the people who were pointing out the gullibility, the messengers, the remainers, the Ramoners as they're called. It's easier to become angry with someone who's telling you the truth than to become angry with the person who's lying to you in the first place. So once the politicians recognized the value of this, they weaponized it, and they used it against other enemies who were pointing out that the government are making mistakes or there are particular flaws in policy. For example, anyone expressing a concern regarding the ending of the lockdown is ridiculed by the media that support the politicians. So if we turn our minds back to the Brexit days and when politicians on the Brexit side were never held to account, and instead those who did raise concerns were laughed at or insulted or referred to as Project Fear. The same thing is happening today. Anyone who raises concerns about lowering the lockdown is regarded as a nanny state fan or someone who is happy to be under lockdown, someone who doesn't put trust in the British system, doesn't put trust in the NHS. In reality, they're not putting trust in the government because the government has lied to them and has a long history of lying to the public. Now, this attitude of, well, if I'm suffering, I don't mind, or I'm happy about that because you're suffering also, I think is pretty much an online phenomenon. I don't think these people really exist or would be willing to say these things in the light of day, in a public sphere or in person, really. It's much easier to say these types of things behind a keyboard, behind a screen on your phone, because there's no real consequence for saying these things. I can write anything, post it, and then never see that person again. While if I'm sitting down with someone in public, it's much more difficult to say I'm happy if you're suffering. It's much more difficult to say that. I think, once again, this is an online phenomena, and it's an attempt to troll people who are presenting legitimate concerns. It's an attempt to belittle them. It's this tribalism at work again. I'm supporting my team, you're on the opposite side. If you're suffering, then I'm happy. If that causes me to suffer also, so be it. But I think in reality, the feeling is different. I think once people meet in person and they see someone on the other side suffering, they will, I hope, feel a level of empathy towards that human being. Let me know in the comments, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks. Why not become a Patreon and enjoy access to our Discord server where we share news, chat, and have some fun? If you become a patron, you can also make video suggestions on topics that are important to you. Check it out via the link in the description.